Donald Trump's style of diplomacy and the following exchange of blows on social media have put much strain on the US-Ukrainian relations, while the events of the last few days affecting the peace talks over the war in Ukraine. And what is Europe to expect from Washington? And to discuss it, we're joined by Cordelia Buchanan-Ponczek, a research fellow at the Finnish Institute of International Affairs. Good evening.
Hello, Maciej. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for accepting our invitation. So what do you think, why do you think the American side decided to cancel the press conference after Kellogg-Zelenskyy meeting in Kyiv today?
I don't know why. I don't know why they decided to cancel it. I'm glad that the meeting went ahead. I'm glad that Kellogg was there after he met with Duda yesterday. These meetings are important, but the cancellation of the press conference follows a series of just strange events that had been unfolding over the past 24, 48, over the past week, really, where we've seen some very strange actions out of the United States. And I think there's a larger question whether this is part of a grand plan, a strategy that's supposed to help with the peace process, or what is it that's going on? I maybe have as many questions as you do.
Right, and so the following would be, let me quote something first. Kyiv should never have started the war 3 years ago, and as a dictator without elections, Zelenskyy better move fast or he is not going to have a country left, says Donald Trump. Well, who is Washington's opponent and who is its ally in the conflict in Ukraine?
This is such a question, and I think Americans and Europeans are shocked. But in the United States in particular, I think that there's a bit of an information gap. I think not all Americans are aware that this rhetoric is being used. Those are aware, I find, are falling largely into two camps. The one camp is worried and they're outraged. And then the other camp, again, feels like this is part of a grand scheme, a large plot. And that group as well, unfortunately, doesn't seem to understand that a lot of this rhetoric is incorrect. President Trump has been floating remarks about the amount of money that the United States has given to Ukraine vis-a-vis Europe, for example. Obviously, he said things about the elections, and these things are factually incorrect, but there's not enough fact-checking going on in the spheres of the internet where such individuals are championing Trump for taking such a hard line against Ukraine. And this has then added to the shock that the Europeans feel at the American rhetoric.
So this rhetoric, using words like dictator, this is designed to reach the domestic audience.
I'm not sure if it's designed to reach the domestic audience. I'm not sure who it is designed to reach. But I think as a part of that, I'm really surprised that we haven't seen more outspoken sort of contesting these remarks by classic hawkish senators and congresspeople in the United States. I mean, you have people like Mitch McConnell, you have John Thune, who have been long-standing Republicans, people that are against Russia. I mean, they have spent their entire careers as part of this, United States as a beacon of democracy in the world, and part of that being strong defense spending, working with European allies, and keeping Russia regulated to its sphere. I've been surprised that we haven't heard more from them to help set the record straight, especially to the domestic audience. But on the other hand, I do want to remind the viewers that one of the reasons that Donald Trump was elected was to respond to domestic pressures, to respond to things like immigration, inflation. And recently, a lot of Americans have been feeling as though the United States should be less engaged abroad and more engaged at home. And they see this as a trade-off. They see resources that are being spent abroad as resources that could be spent in the United States. And that's a problem. It's not so straightforward, it's not so simple, but when you're putting things into 140 or 280 characters, whatever it is nowadays, they can be oversimplified very quickly.
Talking about resources, let me now quote US National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. We presented the Ukrainians an incredible and historic opportunity to have the United States of America co-invest with Ukraine, invest in its economy, invest in its natural resources, and really become a partner in Ukraine's future in a way that's sustainable, but also would be, I think, the best security guarantee that they could ever hope for, much more than another pallet of ammunition. Now, in reality, what would signing the deal presented by the US to grant Washington some 50% of Ukraine's rare earth minerals mean for Kyiv in the long run?
It seemed like a bad deal to Kyiv for the time being, which is why they didn't sign it. It would be a great deal for the Americans, which is why they wanted them to sign it, and which is why they have made talks about further aid to Ukraine contingent upon this deal. To take a step back, I just want to enforce that aid is still flowing to Ukraine right now. There's just under $4 billion of military aid to Ukraine left. That was authorized under the Biden administration, signed on by many of the Republicans who are currently eerily silent. But there have been no overtures for a new aid package precisely because of the deal that you mentioned, because there hasn't been agreement there. I think that Zelenskyy was right to take a step back and to pause, to use it as an opening moment to see where the United States and Ukraine could come to a better understanding. I mean, Zelenskyy himself has floated the idea of U.S. investment in Ukraine as part of a reconstruction project. So it's not outside the realm of possibility. But clearly this deal, the terms of which have been leaked, were so egregious that Ukraine felt as though it was not getting a fair say and that it was better to reject it than accept those terms, especially with a country that is trying to be Ukraine's ally and purporting to be so.
Right, Donald Trump also says that Russia actually holds the cards in peace negotiations over Ukraine after having annexed or conquered 20% of its territory. Now, does this mean for Washington that Russia has an upper hand in negotiations?
Well, it certainly seems like Washington is not helping Russia to not have an upper hand. Some of the comments that have been made, I mean, giving Ukraine over to Russia already, it feels like by saying that they will not have membership in NATO, that Russia gets to keep the territory that it has. I mean, right now, to me, one of the key issues is this question of peacekeepers. Russia has said that it is completely opposed to peacekeepers on the border. The United States has not taken a strong stance on this. European allies have stepped up to the plate. They've been asked to step up to the plate. They have stepped up to the plate. The United Kingdom has come forward. France and Sweden have expressed their interest. Other European nations have said that they'd be willing to consider different deals. And yet we haven't heard anything. So to me, this is a litmus test to see what kind of negotiations the United States sees on this peacekeeping deal.
Mm-hmm. Right. Now, talking about a peacekeeping mission to Ukraine, head of the Ukraine intelligence, Kirill Budanov, says that deploying peacekeepers is not a solution to bring a lasting peace to Ukraine. And therefore, what other security guarantees can Kyiv be looking for?
I'm not sure what security guarantees they can be looking for right now. And I think a comment like that, again, is a way to open the conversation with European allies and with the United States. I think that Kyiv sees its position vis-a-vis the United States and Russia right now with these talks taking place. And so they have to take hard stances on issues like peacekeepers, on issues like security guarantees in order to move the conversation forward. And I think this is part of the conversation that the European Union and European nations will need to have too, because certainly lasting and secure peace for Ukraine is a part of lasting and secure peace for Europe as well. And this is incredibly important. Related to that, I mean, Hegseth is talking about large cuts to the Pentagon, to military spending, which will invariably result in a drawdown of American troops in the Middle East and in Europe. But I'm sure a Polish audience will be happy to hear that Hegseth was saying that the Polish troops in Ukraine, in Poland, the U.S. troops in Poland will not be going anywhere.
Right, but what is Vice President J.D. Vance talking about? Now, let me quote. He addressed today the future of U.S. and European relations. Obviously, we're going to continue to have important alliances with Europe, but the strength of those alliances is going to depend on whether we can take our societies in the right direction. He also added, you do not share values if you're jailing people for saying we should close down our border. And he also added, you don't have shared values if you close down elections, if you don't like the results. So let's have shared values and free expression. That's the path to strong alliances. What does it mean? How to interpret it?
I think that Vance has gotten a lot of criticism already for his comments at the Munich Security Conference. And I think that comments like this are really a continuation of an ideological discussion between Europe and the United States. So it's not just military anymore. It's not just trade. It's ideologies. And these sorts of comments are a continuation of that. And certainly, the elections that will go on this Sunday in Germany and the elections that will follow in Europe later this year, for example, in Poland, will be an answering to Vance to some degree, and that will be a way of Europe responding how this conversation on ideology is going to be taken forward.
Let's see what will this answer be. Cordelia Buchanan-Ponczek, Research Fellow at the Finnish Institute of International Affairs, was our guest this evening. Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Maciej.
Thank you. And thank you for watching, and stay with us for much more news and features here on TVP World.